So Katie Porter is arguably the leading candidate for governor. She, former congresswoman, ran for senator, didn't make it. Her and Barbara Lee were in that race, and she's under hot water for an interview that she did and a clip of her yelling at a staffer to get out of her camera shot. The interview saw her, be asked about the 40% of Californians that voted for Trump and what she was going to do to appeal to these voters, and she kind of just waved it off and then got upset about the follow-up questions and started like threatening to get out of there. Now, what I always try to say is that with politicians, I think there's a certain temperament they have to have, and it's something that I think most of them do have, whether I like them or not, which is when they're in the interview format where someone is asking them questions, they can expect to stay calm, collected. A lot of times it's not the question that will make you look dumb or bad, but rather your answer to it. And if you're a left-leaning progressive individual, which I think Porter is, people like us are going to be asked, how are you going to pay for this? What can they do to fix this issue that nobody else is talking about, usually something relating to housing or healthcare costs or the environment. And when those questions come up, we have to give specific, concrete answers to it, because if we don't, we can set back our positions or our movements and end up making other people who believe as we do look bad as well. With this interview, Porter messed up thoroughly. She was very dismissive of that 40% of voters. Let me explain this to people. I am a big proponent of getting rid of the Electoral College because I feel like it doesn't make any sense for there to be a system in place where a person can win a majority of votes, in some cases by several million, and still possibly not win. A lot of Republicans say that this will make it to where only the big states will determine elections, but that's not really a big deal because a lot of the larger states give both sides pretty significant amounts of votes. Trump winning, 40% of the vote over here, for example, is indicative of the fact that California is not this complete blue liberal dystopia that people online try to paint it as. Now, we also have what's called a jungle primary, which is where, and I know that name sounds goofy, and it is goofy, you can have two people of the same party be up against each other in the general election in November if they receive the first and second largest number of vote totals. So like if I ran for an office and I'm up against a Democrat, depending on where we are, like if we're in the blue district, right, and I get the second highest number of votes, they get the highest number of votes, it would be Democrat versus Democrat in the general election. So that share of Republican voters is actually extremely significant because you're running in a primary that has every party in it. What Porter should have said is that I'm going to talk about the housing crisis. I'm going to talk about these high costs on food and gas, high healthcare cost. And if someone who voted for Trump feels like my positions resonate with them, they are welcome to support me as well. I'm not discriminating against anyone based off of who they supported during a time of economic instability in the U.S. I think that answer would have been much more preferable and a lot more honest than what we ended up getting, which is, why would I need them? But the other part of this also is that now you're seeing other candidates, other people in the race who are telling her, hey, get out. You don't have the temperament for a job like this. And under most circumstances, I would say they are being, facetious, right? Like I think they're blowing it out of proportion on purpose, because let's call it what it is. The Democratic Party, those are some of the people calling for her to leave. The Democratic Party does not really care much about temperament. This is the same party that allowed an 80-something-year-old man, or I guess in the time in his 70s, to not only run for president while clearly having something wrong with him up there, but also to be considered for re-election while also having something wrong up there. This is the same party that, as we speak, one of the people who has the highest chances of becoming mayor of New York is a former governor of New York who was ousted from office after dozens and dozens and dozens of cases of, allegations relating to harassment. I mean, there is no moral equivalency to make in terms of saying, oh yeah, the Democrats really stand for treating people a certain way. That's a joke. But what I will say is that when you're running for any office, congressman, senator, governor, president, there is a certain temperament you have to show when talking to people, whether it's voters, reporters, because those are the two most significant groups you're going to speak with. In terms of, you need the reporters to relay whatever your positions are in the press. You need the voters, obviously, to get the vote. To win the election, you need them to support you. And her being this flippant about what is really a fairly simple and honestly very generic question to ask somebody in a state where there's a significant number of voters in the other party, does raise questions about, does she have the temperament for this kind of job? Now, as far as should she drop out, I would prefer that she not. I think if she comes out and apologizes and does a better job in terms of maintaining her temper, managing her temper, that she'll be better off for it. But this is what happens when you do not show a thick skin, or at least a basic sense of, what's a good way of putting it? I'm not going to call it humanity, but just the proper way to act when you're conducting yourself in the public. You have people who will take what was clearly a weakness of you as a candidate and pounce on it. So that one interview and that one clip of her angrily shouting at her staffer, which I would be very surprised if politicians didn't do that all the time. Most of them are smart enough to not get caught on camera doing it. That's enough for them for people to be calling for her to basically end her career. Like, yeah, don't bother running for this office anymore. So it's a teachable moment. If you're someone that wants to run for office, and again, it's sad that someone who has actually been in elected positions before is acting like this, but still, if you're someone that wants to run for office, you have to have a calm disposition when speaking to journalists and when speaking to voters. You can yell and scream at other politicians. You can type all kind of crazy stuff on Twitter. But in terms of directly dealing with voters and most members of the press, especially when they're asking questions that aren't even that crazy or invasive or rude, you're not going to get anywhere by acting the way that Porter did. So I hope she can improve, because she is, I think, of any of the people that are announced, the most interesting I'd want, the one I'd want the most for governor. But she has to do a better job of portraying herself.